Into chapter 13, just looking at the first two verses, it says, Saul reigned 1 year, and when he had reigned 2 years over Israel, Saul chose him 3,000 men of Israel, whereof 2,000 were with Saul in Michmash and in Mount Bethel, and 1,000 were with Jonathan in Gibeah of Benjamin, and the rest of the people he sent every man to his tent. So King Saul reigned for a year, where apparently nothing really worth mentioning happened. They skip right over it. They go exactly to year 2. So it's not exactly the non-stop soap opera that we see, the royal lives. And well, good. Do I need to start over? Is that what you're saying? We're live. So Saul reigned for a year. Nothing really happened. It's not a non-stop soap opera. It's not a whole bunch of drama. He reigned for a year. But in his second year, Saul took the step of establishing the rudimentary standing force of Israel's military. And it's a big step. Israel becomes a military powerhouse in the region there. They depending on who's the king, who's in charge, they're beating people left and right with some of these people through a very large army. Now, most of Saul's military accomplishments were dealing with his neighbors, as we learn about in a little bit. So he wasn't out expanding his borders or conquering nations or being aggressive towards everybody. That wasn't his goal at all. Right now, it's just about defense. He's a brand new king, and he wants to have some kind of a defensive military presence about him to deploy for Israel for his own sake. So over the years, he grows Israel into a strong, legitimate military power that eventually falls under the command of King David. So what he did, and they don't give us the play-by-play on this, the exact logistics of that process, but he gathered a whole bunch of fighting men, and maybe he did it himself, maybe he chose them by units or had somebody else like his son help him out here, or maybe he had a great military parade. You've seen North Korea have their military parades in Russia, and they file by file by file, and it seems like it's never ending, like a really long train. Maybe he just sat there and watched them go by and chose them. Whatever he did, he chose 3,000 men out of the finest soldiers that he could find. He kept 2,000 of them at Michmash, a spot about 9 miles northeast of Jerusalem. I am not sure about that pronunciation. It may be Michmash or Mishmash. I don't really know. Michmash sounds all right. The other 1,000 troops he stationed in his own hometown with his eldest son Jonathan. So he put them in Gibeah. And this is the first mention that we see of Jonathan. Jonathan becomes a big player later on. He is the soul that is intertwined with King David. They are the best of friends here, but this is the first time we see him. Saul selects 3,000 of the finest fighting men out of everyone that he's got gathered there, and then he sends every other man back home to his tent. He says, y'all can get out of here. I don't need you right now. Verses 3 through 5. And Jonathan smote the garrison of the Philistines that was in Gibeah, and the Philistines heard of it. And Saul blew the trumpet throughout all the land, saying, Let the Hebrews hear. And all Israel heard say that Saul had smitten the garrison of the Philistines, and that Israel also was had in abomination with the Philistines. And the people were called together after Saul to Gilgal. And the Philistines gathered themselves together to fight with Israel, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore in multitude. And they came up and pitched in Michmash, eastward from Bethaven. So now Saul has some men stationed at strategic places. So he moves his goal. It is no longer just establishing. He's wanting to push the Philistines back just a little bit. He's a king. He's got a kingdom. But as we see now, a kingdom is nothing without some kind of borders. So he has Philistines at the moment still oppressing some of his people, still leeching over into the land of Canaan. So he's seeking to push them back just a little bit. They're still here and there. They still have an army. They have outposts. They use them for blacksmithing, and we see that in a little bit here. And Saul knows there's going to be some pushback, and he knows that they're probably going to gather their army, and the situation's going to escalate a bit. But he's king now, and he doesn't want a kingdom that is in any way under the rule of another people, depending, where you go. He doesn't want Philistine areas within his kingdom, so he's asserting himself here. And after the garrison of the Philistines was destroyed by Jonathan, Saul blows a trumpet. He puts out the call for all the fighting men throughout all the land, because he knows the Philistines are about to come knocking. And he's done that previously, and it gathers a whole bunch of people. It gathered 300,000 people the last time that they were going to go to war. And he puts out the call again. He says, we've smitten the garrison of the Philistines. It says Israel also had an abomination with the Philistines. It's worded a little clunky right there. That's not saying that they were implicated in any kind of sinful or wicked behavior. That's saying in the eyes of the Philistines, they held the Israelites as abominable. It's just saying they hated each other. And all the Israelites then were called by Saul to assemble at Gilgal. And sure enough, as expected, the Philistines, they gather themselves together. They have 30,000 chariots, it says, and 6,000 horsemen. Now, the problem with that is, anytime we see numbers, military numbers, given in the Bible of an army like that, there is always less chariots than there are horsemen listed. Which of course there is. They're not going to have a chariot for each horseman. It's not going to be a 1-to-1. There's always less chariots than there are horsemen. So just to read you from a commentary here, 30,000 chariots compared with 6,000 horsemen is out of all proportion. Possibly the final mark in the word Israel has been taken by some copyists for a numeral, and as it signifies 30, it has changed to 1,000 into 30,000, or simpler still, Shin, the number for 300, has been read with 2 dots and so changed into 30,000. So, again, when we've talked about this before, sometimes we have to guess at the ancient Hebrew translation of some words. We have to use context clues and see. It never gets into salvific territory. It never actually becomes a strict kind of doctrinal argument that we have with it. But they didn't have vowels in their words. They used letters for numbers, so they didn't have a separate body of marks that were enumerations. They were numbers, that's or letters. That's how they would write out their numbers, was through different letters here. And so there are disagreements sometimes. Some people think that copyists might have misinterpreted something, but all of that to say, 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen doesn't make much sense. The real number is much more likely to be 3,000 or 1,000 chariots. It's a sizable army advancing, an army of the Philistines that's far superior to the standing military that Saul has put together. So 3,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, an uncountable number of infantry. It says that they came and assembled themselves right by Michmash, and it was men as much as the sands of the seashore. Sand which is on the seashore in multitude there. So horsemen, chariots, and a whole bunch of infantry are all assembled there against King Saul. So Saul, who's put out this call to arms, better get a pretty good turnout, because he's fighting infantry that can't be numbered and a whole bunch of horsemen and chariots there. Or God better show up and discomfit some people again, as he previously had, because if neither one of those things happen, then Saul's reign is going to be quite short. We're just in year 2. Verses 6 through 8. When the men of Israel saw that they were in a strait, for the people were distressed, then the people did hide themselves in caves and in thickets and in rocks and in high places and in pits. And some of the Hebrews went over Jordan to the land of Gad and Gilead. As for Saul, he was yet in Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. And he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed. But Samuel came not to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So the Israelites that do show up see this vast army encamped against them, and they are distressed. It says they are in a strait. They're in a pickle. They don't see how this army can be defeated, so they scatter and they hide. They hide in caves, they hide among the clefts of rocks, they hide themselves in thickets and in towers. When it says high places, it means that they were barricading themselves together in tall towers, defensible positions. It says they even hide in pits, and you've got to be pretty scared to go hiding in a pit. And some of them, as it says in verse 7, even traveled east over the Jordan, fleeing to the furthest Israelite land that they could possibly get to. They're even crossing the great Jordan River to clear themselves from the Philistines' incoming army there. But Saul stayed in Gilgal. And everyone that was left over, everyone that didn't hide, everyone that answered his summons but wasn't too scared to face the Philistines, they stayed with their king in Gilgal, trembling and scared. Trembling and scared, but still with their king, so at the very least loyal. And according to verse 8, when it says in verse 8, and he tarried 7 days according to the set time that Samuel had appointed, but Samuel came not to Gilgal. So according to verse 8, Saul had spoken with Samuel, most likely at the time that he had sounded the horn and called for his people to assemble, and they made some kind of a plan for Saul to wait until a specific time, and Samuel would join him in Gilgal to consecrate the army, to prepare them for battle, to offer sacrifices and appeal to God on their behalf. Now, there are a lot of people out there who want to try and tie this back to 1 Samuel chapter 10. Which really muddies the timeline here. It's still him waiting on Samuel for 7 days back then, but we have no reason to think that was given back then is a prophecy that's applicable to this period 2 years later. In 1 Samuel 10, verses 7 through 8, it says, when these signs have come, do as the occasion demands, for God is with you. And you shall go before me to Gilgal, and surely I will come to you to offer burnt offerings and to sacrifice peace offerings. Wait 7 days until I come to you and show you what you are to do. That was instruction in chapter 10 when he first told Saul that he's going to be captain over the host of Israel. That was way back then. That's when he said you're going to meet musicians and the Spirit's going to descend on you and you'll prophesy with them. And then he went up to the high place and he met Abner, who was coming down, and he asked him what Samuel had told him. That was way back then. So again, it's the same 7 days, but don't confuse that here. That was a long time ago, and that wasn't Samuel prophesying about this specific battle. So this was just an agreed upon timetable between Saul and Samuel before battle was set to begin. Problem is, Samuel gets caught up doing something, and we're never told what. We don't have any idea why he was late. But he was late. He missed the 7-day mark. 7 days pass, and he still hasn't shown up. Saul's holding up his end of the deal, but every hour that passes, a few more people are leaving. His army is thinning out. He's sitting there still watching this giant force of Philistines that are amassed against them, and he's having to watch his army go just a little bit at a time. So what's a king to do when something like that's happening? Verses 9 through 14. And Saul said, bring hither a burnt offering to me and peace offerings. And he offered the burnt offering. And it came to pass that as soon as he had made an end of offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet him that he might salute him. And Samuel said, what hast thou done? And Saul said, because I saw that the people were scattered from me, and that thou camest not within the days appointed, and that the Philistines gathered themselves together at Michmash, therefore said I that the Philistines will come down upon me to Gilgal, and I have not made supplication unto the Lord. I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering. And Samuel said to Saul, thou hast done foolishly. Thou hast not kept the commandment of the Lord thy God, which he commanded thee. For now would the Lord have established thy kingdom upon Israel forever. But now thy kingdom shall not continue. The Lord hath sought him a man after his own heart, and the Lord hath commanded him to be captain over his people, because thou hast not kept that which the Lord commanded thee. Now, what's wrong with all this? Doesn't God help those who help themselves, right? That's in the Bible, isn't it? That's in Proverbs somewhere, right? It's too wise to not be in the Bible somewhere. Well, guess it's not in the Bible at all. That's something we like to tell ourselves. God helps those who help themselves. And we may find that to be practically true in most cases, but it's not biblical. And you know what God loves even more than a leader who can adapt? You know what God desires more than a king who can think quickly on his feet? Obedience. Someone who obeys. In fact, we're just a couple chapters away from one of Samuel's more memorable verses. In Samuel 15, he says, "Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as in obeying the voice of the Lord? Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice, and to hearken than the fat of rams." God would much rather have you being obedient than try and think on your feet around what he has plainly told you to do. So doing what we think God might want is not as good as doing what he's directly revealed to us. You don't have to do high-level thinking on a lot of what's in the Bible. A lot of it is just plain in your face. Don't do something or do something. You don't have to think outside the box a lot of the time when it comes to what God's told us. So Saul saw the army, and you can easily imagine what's going through his head, right? I mean, we can all kind of put ourselves in there. You say, wow, that's a big army. I really need Jehovah to step in on this one. Where on earth is Samuel? 7 days has come and gone. He said he would be here. If we don't get this offering going, I don't think God's going to help us. Man, I just wish Samuel would hurry up. And all those thoughts are fine. It's when he starts getting creative that he messed up. He says, I know there's a proper way to do this. I know God laid it all out step by step, but surely God doesn't want his people to die here, right? Surely God's name would be glorified more in a victory than a defeat because Samuel had a flat tire or a dead oxen or whatever kept him here. Surely God wouldn't mind if I went ahead and took care of this. And people, that little phrase right there, that line of thinking is thrown around by corrupted pulpits all over this nation every Sunday morning. Surely God wouldn't mind. That's a rough way to start a sermon. That'll get you off track pretty quick. Surely we know God's heart on this matter. Surely we can look at it through our own cultural context and see the Scripture, and we can really get down to what God was thinking when he gave us this law. That's how this world justifies every bit of culture that conflicts with the Word of God. Gay marriage, premarital relations, abortion, drugs, theft, lying, whatever it is, we know the essence of God's will. I mean, we see the law that he put down there, but we know what he was really thinking. We can tell God's heart on these issues, and he looks at the greater picture. We know what he's prescribed in the revelation of his word, but surely he wouldn't mind if we deviated from his law just a little bit because we know what his feelings truly are. It's reasoned disobedience. That's what it is. We've educated ourselves into sinfulness. God save us from reasoned disobedience. That line of thinking cost Saul his kingdom. Cost him everything here. As soon as he was done offering the burnt offering, Samuel appeared. Almost like it was a test. Like God was just keeping him intentionally. Not in a way to tempt Saul, but as a test to see if his faith is where it should be, and he failed. And Saul seems to feel completely justified in what he had done at first, because when he sees Samuel coming up, he goes out to greet him, to salute him. He seriously goes out to offer him a solemn welcome to the battlefield. And all it records is Samuel saying, "What hast thou done?" But by the way Saul immediately goes on the defense there, you have to think Samuel wasn't asking it in this dry, unemotional manner. He probably sees the altar, sees the blood, sees the ashes. He's probably walking over and looking everything over, looking up at the sky and waving his hand, and then looking at Saul finally and saying, "What hast thou done? This was so perfect. We had this set just the way we wanted it here. What have you done?" So Saul says that, well, the people were leaving. You didn't show up when you said you were showing up. The Philistines were about to attack. I didn't want to do it. What does he say in verse 12? He says, I forced myself, therefore, and offered a burnt offering. The situation demanded a small bit of disobedience for the greater manifestation of God's will. It's a strategic failure for the greater victory. Samuel tells Saul, you've acted foolishly. It's Christians today.
Saul had more faith in himself than he did. He did that more than once. He took control. Saul was very, very concerned always with the image, with what the people saw, what the people thought. He all the way through reading about Saul, he is especially when David killed Goliath.
The song that arose from that.
You know, David, and people said Saul's killed his 1,000 and David his 10,000. Saul was very much a politician, very concerned with image and very much more believing in himself than a higher power.
Well, and we see despots, tyrants all over the world. If you have no real substance politically, if force is your only way to govern, then you really care about image. You really don't want negative propaganda. You don't want free speech. You don't want people speaking out. And Samuel looks at Saul here and he says, you've acted foolishly. You fool. There's no such thing as a strategic loss when you're in the army of God. You go forward. That's it. That's all you do. God may give the victory and he may withhold it, but he works all things towards good for those that follow him, who are the called according to his purpose and who love him. You don't have to take a step back. You take steps forward. That's all you do. Yes, ma'am. Well, I mean, that's the thought there. You go ahead.
This was like very early in Saul's reign, right?
Year 2.
And right, so God's told Samuel, and Samuel told Saul that he's going to take
The throne away from him. Yeah, he's going to lose his kingdom.
But he doesn't, he allows him to be king for, what was he, king 20, 30 years?
I can't put an actual number. Something like that, yeah. I don't know, maybe not, probably lower than that. I can't say. David was young. He was best friend with Jonathan. Jonathan's old enough, at least now, to lead a military campaign. So, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 years, something like that.
So Saul had all that time to think about that, didn't
he? Yeah. He knew he was living on borrowed time the whole time here. Samuel told him that God is now seeking someone else after his heart and is going to take the throne from you. God would have established your kingdom for a long, long time, but not now. God wanted from you a man that would follow after his own heart, and that's the big underlying tone of this whole passage. It seems like a small sin. And I mean, in the grand scheme of things, maybe it's procedural, right? It's just a logistics kind of thing. It's a small bit of reasoned disobedience that Saul, by his own admission, didn't really want to do. He didn't wake up that morning and say, today is the day. He was backed into a corner, and his faith wasn't what it should have been, and he committed a relatively, I'd say, understandable sin, right? We all understand the motivation behind it. It's not like he was just coming out of left field doing something that was insane and crazy and wicked. But in God's eyes, what's at stake here is the hierarchy. It's God, then it's God's appointed captain, Saul, and then it's God's people. But it's God first. And right out of the gate with a brand new king, we're not letting that hierarchy go. Yes, ma'am?
Well, it's kind of like that, was it
Uzzah, who reached out to stabilize the ark.
Yeah, it's kind of like your gut reaction that
exactly what it is.
But it's still disobedience.
It is, and that's, Spurgeon had a quote on Uzzah one time that his fatal mistake was to assume that his own flesh was less corrupt than the dirt. What he reached out, it's reasoned disobedience. It was a split-second reasoned disobedience at that, but the scales in his head were like, I can disobey God and save the ark, or I can let it go, be obedient to God, and it's going to land in the dirt. And surely God doesn't want that. Surely God wouldn't want that. It's the same assumption that we make on that.
But when you react to something, you don't reason it out in your head. I mean, it's just like when before y'all were parents, we let our kids stand up in the seat in the car next to us, and we did this how many times? Reaction. It's just reaction.
She never did that to me.
You have a brick in your lap.
She said, "Here, son, let it go if we hit water."
Well, that is a good point. When he saw that ark falling, he didn't stand there and reason it out. That was just a reaction. That's like to grab something when you see it start to fall off a table, and everything. That was a reaction.
I don't know, with some of the history and the weight of what they were doing at that time, you'd have to condition yourself beyond your reactions. Do you remember when the presence of God came down on Mount Sinai? I believe it was before he gave the Ten Commandments, he said, rope off the mountain. Don't let people touch it. Don't even let animals touch it. And rope it off so nobody accidentally touches the thing, because the power of God would spill forth onto them. There's a rule given for their own protection here, much like touching the ark on there. There is a power of God. When we went through Leviticus and Numbers, I think it was mostly Leviticus, right? Yeah, we talked about Leviticus. We likened the power of God to nuclear power. Like when you work at a nuclear plant, there are clothes you have to wear. There are badges you wear. There are rules that you follow for your own safety, because you are working with a source of power that will take your life if you don't follow these rules. Not actively taking your life, but just from your sheer exposure to the power. So, yeah, it was a reaction. He reached out, he stopped the thing, and the Spirit of God spilled forth onto him, just like it would have at the mountain had somebody crossed the line there. But again, knowing what you know, knowing what you're doing, knowing the history of it, and thinking back to the mountain roped off and other instances where God's power has been on a full display, you do your best to condition yourself, maybe, like hot sauce on your thumb to keep from sucking or something like that, Put it in your pockets, guys. So God is not willing to, this early in the kingdom, right out of the gate, let that hierarchy go. He is firmly establishing that even the king is to be under God. This king that they have chosen for themselves, this way of living that they wanted, still falls under the dominion of God. So God's driving that home. However tall and handsome and strapping Saul was, Saul is still under God. And even though Samuel went over and over and over it, and he's repeated it a whole bunch of times. He says, fear God and keep his commandments. Fear God and keep his commandments. Fear God and keep his... We've still arrived at the same place. He did fear God, but in this instance, he feared the Philistines just a little bit more, and he reasoned himself right out of his obedience. Verses 15 through 18. And Samuel arose and gat him up from Gilgal unto Gibeah of Benjamin. And Saul numbered the people that were present with him, about 600 men. And Saul and Jonathan his son and the people that were present with them abode in Gibeah of Benjamin, but the Philistines encamped in Michmash. And the spoilers came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. 1 company turned unto the way that leadeth to Ophrah, unto the land of Shual. And another company turned the way to Bethhoron, and another company turned to the way of the border that looketh to the valley of Zeboim toward the wilderness. Samuel doesn't stick around. He's rightfully upset, and he leaves. He's apparently disgusted with the whole thing. He decides he might as well just go on home, so he goes back to Gibeah. And that leaves Saul there, staring at the Philistine army, counting his men. This time, though, is nothing like the last time. Last time, he butchered an ox. He sent the call out. He said, if you don't answer, may you be like this butchered ox. And over 300,000 men showed up to fight against Nahash and the Ammonites. Now his men have been dwindling more and more every day. And then Samuel left, apparently without offering any kind of sacrifice. And all that Saul has left is 600 men. Everybody else is out hiding in caves and thickets and pits. So King Saul, he takes what men he has, and he takes his son Jonathan, and they go to Gibeah, and they dig in. They fortify their position. There's not going to be a battle. The Philistine forces are too great, and they have no reason to think that God's favor is on this encounter. So he takes what men he has. He sets up a defensive position in the city where Samuel went. And what's being described in verses 17 and 18? It says, and the spoilers came out of the camp of the Philistines in 3 companies. When it became apparent that the Israelites weren't fighting, that they're not even mounting a defense, they're not putting together an army, the Philistine army split into 3 bands of raiders, 3 companies to go out and to spoil the cities and raid the towns. That's the 3 bands of spoilers there. And so one went to the north to the Benjamite city of Ophrah, one went west to Beth Horon, and the last one went east to the valley of Zeboim, the wild district between the tribe of Benjamin and the Jordan River Valley. Verses 19 through 23. This is interesting. Now there was no smith found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen every man his share and his coulter and his axe and his mattock. Yet they had a file for the mattocks and for the coulters and for the forks and for the axes and to sharpen the goads. So it came to pass in the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people that were with Saul and Jonathan, but with Saul and with Jonathan his son was there found. And the garrison of the Philistines went out to the passage of Michmash. So this passage, the little verses here, it's a little bit of flavor to show the real sad state that the Israelite army was in when they were meeting together. So during the 40 years of Philistine oppression, the Philistines had wisely destroyed and outlawed all the blacksmiths in the land. They disarmed the people they were oppressing. And I don't want to get too, wildly Second Amendment on anybody here, but this is one of the very first plays in the playbook of any government or individual that seeks to totally control a population. Nazi Germany, Communist China, the Soviets, that's what the Philistines did. They said the first thing we're going to do, we're going to disarm these people. So maybe they're hiding swords and a couple things like that somewhere, but they don't have blacksmiths in the land. And true enough, the Philistines were beaten back some time ago. So that period of the 40 years of oppression is more or less over now. The Israelites had a king. They have a little bit of breathing room. At least before this skirmish, they had a little bit of breathing room. But think about it. Over 40 years, that's a whole generation that would have passed on with no smiths among the Israelites. So that's not the kind of thing that you can just pick up and flip a switch and suddenly you have smiths in your nation. It's a trade. You have to apprentice into something like that. It's learned through on-the-job experience under somebody who knows what they're doing. So if 40 years had passed, even if Saul looked around as king and said, you know what, you're going to be a smith and you're going to be a smith and I'm going to fund you out of the treasury or taxes or whatever, well, where are they going to train? They've destroyed all the blacksmiths in the land here. So the system for a while now has been that any time an Israelite needed smith work done, they would have to travel down to the Philistine lands and pay to have it done. So their plows, their cutting implements, the harvest tools, they're at the mercy of the Philistines for all of it. Now it says they have files. They could sharpen things. They could sharpen their pitchforks. They could sharpen the ox goads, that long pointy stick that they use to poke the ox to get it to go a little faster. They could sharpen things, but they were unable to forge or to do any kind of real repairs or real metalworking. They had to travel to pay to get that done. So just imagine the day that this whole ill-fated battle plays out. Not only are the people completely outnumbered, they're completely outarmed. Saul and Jonathan were the only two among them that had any real weapon. That's what it's saying in the last there. So it came to pass in the day of battle, there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people that were with Saul and Jonathan, but with Saul and with Jonathan his son was there found. They had swords and spears, but that's it, just the two of them. The other 600 men who stuck it out and didn't retreat to caves and thickets and pits were standing there with farm implements to fight the Philistines. The Philistines who had shields and spears, who had blacksmiths. And then the chapter ends with a note that the Philistines had separated a detachment to Michmash where they could keep an eye on Saul and his 600 men who were hunkered down in Gibeah and make sure they stay put and keep abreast of all of their movements here. And that's chapter 13. So we'll get into a little bit of chapter 14 here. It's only 7:12. It's chapter 14. This is where some of it starts getting really good. This is one of my favorite parts, actually. Verses 1 through 3. Now it came to pass upon a day that Jonathan the son of Saul said unto the young man that bare his armor, Come, and let us go over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side. But he told not his father. And Saul tarried in the uttermost part of Gibeah under a pomegranate tree, which is in Migron. And the people that were with him were about 600 men. And Ahiah the son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the Lord's priest in Shiloh, wearing an ephod. And the people knew not that Jonathan was God. So this is not too many days after the previous chapter here. Not many days after all this happened. Saul he's still dug in like a tick in Gibeah with his 600 men, and it mentions now he has his priest Ahiah, who's there wearing, or Ahiah, he's there, and he's wearing an ephod. And they make a point of pointing out that he's got the ephod, because what's in the ephod? Urim and Thummim, the way to cast lots, the way to get direct feedback from God here, because they use that in a little bit. So the Philistines are encamped on Israelite lands. They're unchallenged. They're going around spoiling villages. The Israelite army, such that it was, is still hiding in caves and thickets and pits, hoping to not draw the attention of the Philistine army. And in the middle of all this, Saul's son Jonathan looks at his armor bearer and says, I'm tired of waiting. Let's go see what we can stir up. And he leaves Gibeah, and they venture out towards the Philistine garrison, but he doesn't tell Saul. He doesn't tell his father because he's stepping out in faith, really, that God's going to protect him, that God hasn't abandoned his people, and he's afraid that if he tells Saul, that he's going to be stopped. Because Saul's not in the best place right now. He doesn't feel like he has the strongest relationship with Jehovah at the moment. He's still kind of figuring things out. He was told by Samuel that his kingdom is not going to last, that another's going to supplant him, and he doesn't know exactly how that's going to shake out, and because of it, he's essentially paralyzed. He's just dug in this city in a defensive position. He has no intention of moving right now. He's barricaded himself in Gibeah because he feels like that's the only safe thing to do. So look at the contrast here. I love this part. Verses 4 through 7. And between the passages by which Jonathan sought to go over unto the Philistines' garrison, there was a sharp rock on the one side and a sharp rock on the other side. And the name of the one was Bozez, and the name of the other Seneh. The forefront of the one was situate northward over against Michmash, and the other southward over against Gibeah. And Jonathan said to the young man that bare his armor, Come, and let us go over unto the garrison of these uncircumcised. It may be that the Lord will work for us, for there is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. And his armor-bearer said unto him, Do all that is in thine heart, turn thee, behold, I am with thee according to thy heart. So the Philistines, they're nearby. They're monitoring the common paths around the city. So Jonathan was his trusty armor bearer, his squire, right next to him. They sneak out through a little used passage to reach the Philistine garrisons from a vantage that the Philistines wouldn't be actively watching. And they end up approaching it from what's essentially the base of a really steep cliffside. While the Philistines are out looking over there, they're not watching this really steep cliffside. And when they arrive, Jonathan, if you can imagine, just turns to his armor bearer and says, let's go over, just say hi. Maybe God will give them over to us. Maybe he won't. God's not constrained by numbers at all. I know there's only 2 of us here, and that's a whole garrison of Philistines, but yeah, God's God. So let's just go see. Can you imagine that kind of faith? Stepping towards a Philistine garrison. When they arrive, he just turns to him, and he's got this unshakable faith, this firm understanding of the power and the ability of Jehovah. His father is in Gibeah, dug in like a tick, with 600 men, hoping that absolutely nothing happens. Jonathan is crossing over and says, you know what? God's arm hasn't grown weak. I've seen him do some pretty amazing things. Let's just go and see how this turns out. There is no restraint to the Lord to save by many or by few. And we learn in just a little bit, it's about 20 men that they're looking at. This first slaughter is 20 men. I gave the plot away right there. 20 men, that's steep odds. But even still, Jonathan looks at his servant and says, let's approach. Let's just see what God does. I'm curious. Now, to be clear, he's not saying that he knows God will give victory. He doesn't look at his armor bearer and say, hey, let's go thwart these men. God wills it, and I know God wills it. He says, who knows? God might hand them over to us. He might pull us back. His faith isn't in the victory. It's in God. Is that whatever happens here, I know we'll be okay. I don't know if it's guaranteed victory or not, but whatever happens, we're going to be fine. It's faith that however this thing shakes out, God's going to make it all right. And his armor bearer looks at him and says, all right, let's do it. He says he's in because he has seen Jonathan's heart. He doesn't think this is some vainglorious pursuit of fame or notoriety. It's not some bloodlust after vengeance that Jonathan just has to kill somebody. He's in because he has seen Jonathan's faith and his character. So he says, you do whatever seems best to you. Do according to your heart. I'm with you. Verses 8 through 10. Then said Jonathan, behold, we will pass over unto these men, and we will discover ourselves unto them. If they say thus unto us, tarry until we come to you, then we will stand still in our place, and will not go up unto them. But if they say thus, come up unto us, then we will go up, for the Lord hath delivered them into our hand, and this shall be a sign unto us. So this is the plan. Jonathan turns to his armor bearer and says, all right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to approach the garrison. Not all the way. We're going to leave some space, but we're going to make ourselves known to them. We're going to reveal ourselves to them. And if the Philistines see us and say, stay right where you are, we're going to climb down to get you, then those are brave Philistines. They have boldness. They don't mind leaving their defensive positions, their garrison, and we're going to stay right here. We'll do our best to defend. Don't know how that's going to shake out, but we're going to plant in right here. If the Philistines see us and say, come up here, and they beckon us to climb up and come fight them, then they are cowardly Philistines who don't dare leave the defenses of their camp, and this is going to be a sign to us that God has given them over to us, and we're going to march in there, and we're going to lay waste to them. Yes, ma'am?
He just carries Jonathan's armor and
No.
he's not armed, is he?
Well, I mean, with whatever he's got on him, squires typically would have a sword in medieval times here too. I've seen armor bearers in other places have been asked to kill kings and end up falling on their own swords after the fact. So they do have weapons. What was that king's name? Thunder. That guy smacked in the head with a rock, if I'm remembering correctly. And yeah, I don't remember. Yeah, but he said, "Kill me. I don't want to be killed by a woman." And he does, but then if I remember correctly, and I might be mixing stories here too, but if I remember correctly, after he killed him, the armor bearer fell on his own sword. So they're armed. Yeah, he's got something with him, or at the very least, if Jonathan's using a spear, maybe he's using his sword. I know if I'm facing 20 men and this is my only backup, I'm going to give you something.
Yeah.
Take my knife. Here's the fork I used for dinner a while ago. Good luck.
Still just two.
Still just two. But it does say that he gets a few of them. It says that here in a little bit. Verses 11 through 14. And both of them discovered themselves unto the garrison of the Philistines. And the Philistines said, Behold, the Hebrews come forth out of the holes where they had hid themselves. And the men of the garrison answered Jonathan and his armor-bearer and said, Come up to us, and we will show you a thing. And Jonathan said unto his armor-bearer, Come up after me, for the Lord hath delivered them into the hand of Israel. And Jonathan climbed up upon his hands and upon his feet, and his armor-bearer after him, and they fell before Jonathan, and his armor-bearer slew after him. And that first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor-bearer made was about 20 men, within as it were an half acre of land, which a yoke of oxen might plow. So they reveal themselves to the Philistine garrison from the base of the, it's really steep, maybe not a cliff, maybe not straight up. It says he's climbing on his hands and on his feet. So it's not just like a gentle slope that he could just stand up and walk. It's something that he's got to actually get down on all fours on there. But whatever they did, whistling at him, yelling, or throwing little pebbles or something like they're trying to get a girl's attention or something like that. Whatever they do, they get their attention, and the Philistines see them and treat them with complete disrespect. Look at these Hebrew weaklings crawling out of the holes where they've been hiding themselves. These dogs. So they look at these Hebrew rats. And the Philistines call out to Jonathan and his servant. They say, Climb on up here. We're going to show you a thing or two. Which is kind of a spineless taunt, right? I mean, it's the same kind of thing. If somebody were saying, come over here and say that to my face. Say that to me one more time or something. If it's really heated, if they really mean business, they're not waiting for you to come over there. They don't need it repeated. They're closing distance. They're the one on the attack. Everything else is kind of bravado almost. So as Jonathan hears it, he looks at his armor bearer and he says, That's the green light, man. God's in this one for us. That's what we were hoping for. God has given them over to us. And then verse 13 says they climb up on their hands and their feet. So it's at least steep enough that they're all on all fours climbing up there. So it's not a very fast approach. And we don't get the play-by-play. And sadly, I would have liked to have seen it or read about it here. All we're told is they climb up and the Philistines fall before them. Jonathan and his armor-bearer reach the top of the summit, and they both charge forward, and they just decimate this garrison of the Philistines. Close quarters combat. It's a small plot of land. It's 2 Israelites, about 20 Philistine soldiers fighting to the death on not much more than what a yoke of oxen would plow, a half acre of land. That's not a lot for 22 men to be fighting to the death, but that's what it was doing here. Verses 15 through 20. Let's see the fallout of this. And there was trembling in the host, in the field, and among all the people. The garrison and the spoilers, they also trembled, and the earth quaked. So it was a very great trembling. And the watchmen of Saul and Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude melted away, and they went on beating down one another. Then said Saul unto the people that were with him, Number now, and see who is gone from us. And when they had numbered, behold, Jonathan and his armor-bearer were not there. And Saul said unto Ahiah, Bring hither the ark of God. For the ark of God was at that time with the children of Israel. And it came to pass, while Saul talked unto the priest, that the noise that was in the host of the Philistines went on and increased. And Saul said unto the priest, Withdraw thine hand. And Saul and all the people that were with him assembled themselves, and they came to the battle. And behold, every man's sword was against his fellow, and there was a very great discomfiture. Again, I love that word. So, I don't know how this played out again. We're not given all of the details. Maybe a few soldiers of the garrison that weren't slain managed to make their way out, or word got out, or maybe it's on top of they had to climb up to it. Maybe it's a visible spot up there where they can see 2 guys just slaughtering a garrison of Philistines. Whatever happened, word got out. Something's happening. A panic spreads among the Philistines. There's a trembling in the host, a trembling in the field, a trembling in the garrison, among the spoilers, among all the people, and the earth shook with it. A great trembling. So not just not just the rumble of a vast army marching or horsemen and chariots or something like that, a great trembling. God showed up again. This one little spark of faith, like dominoes. You've seen massive domino patterns where people will fill out a gigantic room with the design, and they flick one, and it just goes psh, like that, and the whole room collapses. That's what you're seeing right here. God moved nature to discomfit, to discombobulate and confuse and frustrate the Philistine army, just like he did when previously he thundered with a great thunder. And when Saul's watchers in Gibeah, those 600 men that he's with and the people that he has stationed to watch things, they look out, they can see the army melting away. It's falling to its own hand. It's just dissolving in front of them. And Saul was alerted to what's happening, and he seems to immediately piece some of it together because he didn't authorize the attack. He hadn't made any sacrifices. He'd been locked down with the army and the priests, and he wasn't aware that Israelites were taking any kind of action against the Philistines. So did someone cause this? Did someone lead an attack? Did someone find the blessing of Jehovah and go out and smite the invading army? And so he says, who's missing? And it's Jonathan and his servant. And when he sees that his son Jonathan is gone, he calls for religious council. And the King James has it interpreted as ark. And it's not ark. It's a word that essentially, from what I understand, means holy relic, more or less. The King James translated it as ark. But what he's doing, he's saying to Ahiah, bring hither the holy relic of God, which was with the children of Israel. But what they're saying there is, come forward, I want to consult the Urim and the Thummim, which happens to be with them, right? What they're saying is they have a high priest, because the previous mention of it was after the ark was lost to the Philistines, and they just decimated everything, and the child's name was Ichabod because the glory had left Israel. They wiped out most of the priests. What it's saying is there is a priest with Israel again. There's someone there that they've already pointed out from the author is wearing the ephod, and Saul wants to consult with that priest, to have him consult the Urim and the Thummim to see what's going on. And we know that's what he's doing because when the noise gets such that Saul says, you know what, I'm not waiting, he tells the priest, withdraw your hand. You don't have to keep reaching in there and consulting in the Urim and the Thummim. Just pull your hand out. We don't even care what it says now. The battle's on. Look at them. They're dissolving away. Let's get into this. Well, in addition to that, too, we have no reason to believe that Saul would give orders to bring the ark to Gibeah because it was just a temporary place to set up shop. It'd be kind of nuts for him to say, bring the actual ark down here from where it's been. It's been safely with that guy who's just caretaker of it in his own residence, not in a temple or anything like that. But for Saul to have essentially retreated to Gibeah, holed up with 600 men and the Philistines all around them, we have no reason to think that he would have instructed his army to go out and get the ark and escort it down here with Philistines absolutely everywhere. And then verse 19 says, while he's talking over with the priest and being all cautious, in consulting the Urim and the Thummim, because he had previously offended God, the noise of the Philistines slaughtering themselves grew to such a pitch that he told the priest, he said, forget it, take your hand out of the ephod. We don't need divination to see that God is smiting these people, and we're not going to wait. And he gathers his forces, and they set out to go fight the Philistines. And when they arrive at the battle, they see that every Philistine sword is set against another Philistine. There is a great discomfiture happening among the people there. And it's 7:30, so we're going to stop right there at verse 21. I know, right in the heat of things, right? Oh, the battle's happening. So y'all just remember that. King Saul looked out and said, stop consulting the Urim and the Thummim. We got to go. This battle's happening.